Okay, this is Unit 4, Day 1 Web Quest. Okay, we're going to be working with exponential functions. So, exponential functions, nothing that we have really worked with yet, but this is kind of how they look when you graph them. So, this one here over here is decreasing, because when you read these, you always start from the left like you're reading. You go from here and you go to the right, and it's decreasing. This one here, if you start from the left, go to the right, you can tell it's going up, so it's increasing. So these are the graphs, when we graph it, how they're going to either look. If it's decreasing here, and if it's increasing here. Okay, so first we're going to start with our formula for exponentials. So it says f of x equals a parentheses b to the x power plus c. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to break this down and tell you what each one of these letters represents. Okay, so the a here is our initial value. Initial means that's our beginning value. That's basically what we started with. So this is our initial value, our starting value. Okay? So B is our base. B stands for base, so that makes sense, right? B base. Okay? X, obvious, is up here. It's your exponent. That's what makes it your exponential. So that's your exponent. And then C is going to be your horizontal. Asymptote. And I think I'm going to start typing this M-P-T-O-T-E. Let me put that here. So that's your horizontal asymptote. So your asymptote looks like this. Horizontal means it goes left to right. And also, add this down here for horizontal asymptote, that it this is the line that the graph never touches. It gets really, really close to it, but it never touches. That's called your asymptote, your horizontal asymptote. It goes from left to right, and it's that line on your graph. So if I had a graph, let me use a different color. So if I had a graph here, and so if you look here, these kind of both look really close to like that 0 mark. So we'll figure out how to figure that out. But it's the line that it looks like it's about to touch, but it doesn't touch. It gets really, really close, but it doesn't touch it. Okay? Now, so what do these letters mean other than initial value, base value, exponent, horizontal? Okay? So we're going to look at the first part here. So it says if the base, which is B, so if this B here is bigger than 1, the graph would increase. So basically it would look like over here, it would look like this part over here. So it would go over here. Okay? So now if the base B is between 0 and 1, so if B is between 0 and 1, then the graph will decrease. Okay? Now, to find the y-intercept, you're going to add your letter A and your letter C together. So it's your A, which is here your initial value, plus your C value to get your y-intercept. Now, the asymptote is basically your C value. It's whatever your C value is. Okay? Now, the domain is always going to be the same, and this is what we call all real numbers. You may remember this from geometry, all real numbers, but that basically means it's from negative infinity to positive infinity. And remember, these infinities mean it never stops. So basically, if we look here, from negative infinity to positive infinity. So negative will be on this side, positive will be on that side. Okay? So the range is always going to be your C value, whatever that C is, your asymptote, to infinity. Okay? So now the next video we're going to actually work some of these. So okay, so here is our first example. So if you look at your web class, this is actually example 1. Okay, so what I like to do is go ahead and label each one of these. So I know originally my formula says A parentheses B to the X plus C. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and now right over here, I know initial value is my A. It's whatever my A is. So that means it's going to be 2, right? Okay, so growth or decay. So if it's growing, it's going to be bigger than 1. So your B is going to be greater than 1. So that means greater than 1, or let's say bigger than 1. So B is bigger. Let me type this. B is bigger than 1. Okay, if it's a growth. So in order for it to be a growth, B is bigger than 1. So for it to be the decay, it has to be, B is between 0 and 1. So any decimals or 1, it give you a decay. I mean, it's going to decrease. So if we look here, so is our going to grow or decay? We look at our B. So our B is 2. So our B is 2 because we're looking here. So that's our B. So it is bigger than 1. So it is going to grow. Okay? Now, your asymptote, remember that's your C value. So if we look here, above the C is 5. Okay? Now, for your y-intercept, what we have to do is plug in 0 for your x. And then we'll get our y-intercept. So we plug in 0. So we take our equation, 2 parentheses 2x. So for this x, which is an exponent, we're going to plug in 0 plus 5. Okay? So I'm going to write it the way we should put it in our calculator. 2 parentheses 2, and then it's going to be an exponent of 0. So you have to use that caret key plus 5. And guys, if we go back to our other unit, we know anything to the 0 power is 1. It is not 0. But just plug this into your calculator and you should get 7. So our y-intercept, and the way we write our y-intercept, we put our x as 0. That's your first number. And then we put the y that we need. It's the second number. Okay? Now, our domain, like I told you, is all real numbers. So all real numbers. Or we can actually write it out as negative infinity to positive infinity. So that's the way it is. Okay? Now our range, remember our range, I told you what's your C value to positive infinity. Okay? So if we look back up here, our C value was 5. So our range is going to be 5 to positive infinity. Okay? So now the last step we have to do is actually graph it. Okay, so if we have a graph here, so all we have to do is start with our, we can start here with our asymptote here. We know this is a line that it is never going to cross. Okay? So it is never going to cross where y is 5. So y is 5, I'm going to say here. And I can do my little line so you can see it. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to say this is at 5. So this is where my graph is never going to touch. Now remember, I also said that this graph is going to increase. So if we look back on this page here, this is how our graph should look. It should look like it is going up, not going down. Okay, so I have my asymptote. This is my asymptote here. That's that horizontal line. Then I need to go here to where it has my y-intercept. This is where I'm going to mark my y-intercept. So my y-intercept was at 0, 7. So I need to go to 0, 7. So I need to go to 7 on the y. And I'm going to move some of this. Let's see. Let's move that. Okay. So I know that was my y-intercept. So I'm going to put a dot here. And so I know my graph was actually going up. And I know it was going almost to that asymptote, but it's not touching it. Okay? And my lines are a little crooked, so that's why I don't look exactly right. But that's basically my graph. Okay? So now I want you to try the next example. It should be very similar to this one. So pause this video, and then when you go back, this will be example number 2. Okay, so here's our next example, example 2. So once again, we're going to look here, and I'm going to write our formula so everybody can see this one. Sometimes these get people confused, but we know it's going to be your A, then your B is going to be in parentheses most times with your exponent of x here, and then plus your C. Okay? So if we look here, our A is right in front of here, and we don't see anything. So if we don't see a number, you know, it's always understood to be 1 in front. So my initial value, which is my A, is 1. Okay, so remember, is it going to grow or decay? So if it's greater than 1, if it's the number B is greater than 1, well, right here, B is 0.5. So it's not greater than 1, so we know it can't be a growth. So it has to be a decay. So that means it's going to actually look like this. It's going to start like it's growing, then it's going to actually start going down. Okay? So, and that actually, we actually looked at 0.5 to tell us that our B. Okay? Now your asymptote, or asymptote, I say it all different ways. Remember, it's your C value. Well, I don't see anything for C. And it's not like the A where it has to be a 1 in front. This is at the end. So if there's no number there, it is plus 0. So we have an asymptote of 0. This is that line. It almost crosses. So if I draw my graph, I can go ahead and fill in my asymptote. So my asymptote is going to be at 0. So this is the line my graph almost touches. But I still need a little bit more information. Okay, so my y-intercept, so remember for my y-intercept, I have to plug in 0 into my formula for x. So here's my equation, and I added the 1 and the 0 there. So basically I'm putting 1 parentheses 0.5, and we're putting 0 here, plus 0. So ultimately I'm going to get 1 if you plug that into your calculator. So my y-intercept, remember, we have to write 0, 1. Okay? So now that tells me don't go left or right any, but go up 1. So here's up 1, and I'm going to draw my dot because this is my y-intercept. Okay? My domain is the same, all real numbers or negative infinity to positive infinity. And then my range is going to be my C value. Well, if I look here, my C value that I had, which is also my asymptote, is 0. So it's going to be 0 to infinity. So now, all I have to do, I know my graph is going to be going this way because I said it's decreasing. And it's going to almost touch that green line, which is that asymptote. And now, that's my graph. So pause this video and try the next example that should be very similar to this one. Okay, so here goes example number 3. So once again, I'm going to write my formula out so we can see that. A parentheses B to the x power plus C. Okay? So my initial value is my A value. That's going to be 3. Okay, so we look at our B for growth or decay. So our B is 1/2. So remember, if it's greater than 1, it grows. If it's between 0 and 1, it decays. So 1/2 is clearly, most times you get a decimal, just go ahead and say it's going to be decay or a fraction. So unless it's a mixed number. But if it's a fraction, small fraction, like 1/2, 1/4, whatever, it's going to be decay. So that means my graph is going to look like this. And it would help you to kind of go ahead and do this to let you know how it should look. Okay, your asymptote is your C value. So if you look here, our C value is -1. And guys, also, it may be easier to let you know that it's going to be on the y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. So this is your, oh, excuse me. This is your, that line that your graph never touches. It comes close to, but it never touches. So y is -1 is here. Okay. Now your y-intercept, remember we got to plug in 0 for x. So we take our equation, 3 parentheses 1/2 x minus 1. And so we're going to plug in 0, 3 parentheses 1/2, 0 minus 1. So go ahead and plug that into your calculator. Remember, and the 0 is an exponent, so you have to hit the caret key. And so we should get 2 for our answer. So we would write our y-intercept as 0, 2. So we don't go left or right any, we just go up 2. So if we go up 2, it will be here. And since we know our graph is decreasing, we know we're going to start here and go down. And remember, it's never going to touch this line, even though mine may touch it. But it's never going to touch it. And that's the way it should look. Let's finish our domain and range. Domain is all real numbers or negative infinity to positive infinity. And remember, our range is our C value, which is our C value of -1, that's what we had, to infinity. Okay, so now pause the video and now try the next example that should be very similar to this example. Okay, so here's example number 4. Okay, so once again, I'm going to write my formula. A parentheses B to the x power plus C. Okay, so our initial value once again is the A value. the A is always in front of the parentheses, so there's nothing there. So for if it's in front, we know it has to be a 1 if there's no number there. Okay? So for growth, we got to look at the letter B, which our B is 2. So remember, for growth, it has to be bigger than 1, and it is, so it's going to grow. So our graph is going to look like this. Okay? Now our asymptote is our C value. So our C value is going to be -2. So this is going to be on the y-axis. So let me go ahead and draw that so we can see that. So I go to -2, and I'm going to draw my horizontal asymptote. Now, our y-intercept, remember, we got to plug in 0 for x. So if we plug in 0 for x, remember this is exponent, so you have to use the caret key. So that should give you -1. So when we write this, we write 0, -1, and we're going to plot that. So we stay at 0, go down -1. Okay? So remember how our graph should look. It should be going up. So it goes almost to the asymptote, but it doesn't touch it. Okay? Domain, all real numbers are -infinity to +infinity. And then our range is our C value. So remember, our C value was our -2. So -2 to infinity. Okay? So now you can go ahead and stop this video and try the next example that should be very similar to this. And then we're going to start a new video for the next section.